The stars had always fascinated us. For as long as humanity has gazed upward, we've dreamed of what lies beyond the veil of space, of other worlds, other beings, and the endless possibilities that come with the vast unknown. We've sent probes, built telescopes, and launched satellites, hoping for a sign that we were not alone. But when that sign finally came, no one was prepared for how it would unfold. It was a routine observation, something we had done 1,000 times before. Scientists at the International Space Station were monitoring deep space, just another part of their daily duties, when they noticed something odd, a signal. At first, they thought it was interference, a miscalculation, or just another strange anomaly in the endless expanse of the cosmos. But the signal didn't fade. It grew clearer, more distinct, until it became undeniable. We were hearing something, or someone. The message that followed was unlike anything humanity had ever encountered. It wasn't a simple greeting or a peaceful introduction. No, this was a laugh, a sound of pure amusement echoing through the vastness of space. The beings behind the laughter weren't just mocking us, they were laughing at us. The message was clear. They had been watching us for years, perhaps even centuries, and they found us laughable. At first, we didn't know how to react. It was a mix of confusion, humiliation, and anger. Who were these beings, and why were they mocking us? We were humans, survivors, innovators, the species that had reached the stars. How could they laugh at us? We may have been new to the galactic stage, but we weren't helpless. Our civilizations were built on the blood, sweat, and tears of our ancestors. We weren't some primitive species. We had technology, ambition, and the will to survive. But still, the laughter continued. It wasn't just a few chuckles. It was a chorus of mocking voices echoing across space, as if they were pointing at a child trying to ride a bicycle and falling over every few seconds. The aliens, whoever they were, seemed to see us as nothing more than children playing with toys far beyond our understanding. It was frustrating. It was humiliating. But most of all, it was a wake-up call. We weren't ready for them. Not yet. But something changed. A secret project had been underway for years. Whispers of a new technology, one that could shift the balance. The world's most brilliant minds had been working on it in secret. A ship that could move unseen, that could be silent in its approach. A stealth ship capable of blending into the vastness of space, invisible to even the most advanced alien technology. It was humanity's answer to the mocking laughter. We weren't going to let ourselves be the punchline of a cosmic joke. And so, the ship was built. It was sleek, silent, and deadly. It could hide in plain sight, slipping through the darkness of space without a trace. For years, it remained in the shadows, a project known only to a select few. The technology was cutting edge, and its potential was enormous. But would it be enough? As the day approached for the ship's first real test, the alien laughter continued. The beings that had mocked us were growing bolder in their communications, sending us messages that dripped with disdain. They spoke of how futile our attempts at reaching the stars were, how insignificant our achievements were in the grand scheme of the universe. They laughed at our wars, our struggles, our smallness. But the thing is, those aliens didn't understand humanity. They didn't know us the way we knew ourselves. We are a species born of struggle and survival. We fought wars, endured plagues, and faced countless threats. We've conquered our world, sending our ships into space, landing on the moon, and exploring the cosmos in ways no one ever thought possible. They saw us as weak, as a joke. But we knew something they didn't. When pushed to the edge, humanity didn't back down. We fought harder. We adapted. And we survived. On the eve of the first test, something unexpected happened. The alien laughter suddenly stopped. The mocking tone in their messages grew colder, more threatening. They no longer saw us as a harmless species. They saw us as a threat. Something in our response, something in our defiance, had triggered something deep within them. We had caught their attention, and now they were taking us seriously. The world held its breath as the moment arrived. The stealth ship, codenamed Aegis, was ready for its first real mission. Its crew was a mix of the best, trained in every skill imaginable. They were prepared to do what no one had ever done before, to go where no human had gone and confront the aliens face to face. The mission was simple: get close, observe, and gather intelligence. But there was an underlying purpose. The Aegis wasn't just a ship, it was a statement. A declaration that humanity wasn't to be underestimated. That we weren't here to be laughed at or mocked. The ship slowly decloaked, breaking the silence of space. At first, it was just a faint shimmer, a ripple in the darkness. But then, it became clear: a massive vessel, larger than anything humanity had ever built, gleaming with an eerie, otherworldly shine. The stealth technology had worked. It was invisible to the aliens, who had no idea what was happening. And then came the shock. In the blink of an eye, the ship was no longer hidden. It decloaked entirely, revealing its full form. The aliens, who had laughed and mocked us for so long, were now staring at a force they had never expected. The crew aboard the Aegis was ready, but as the alien ships appeared on the radar, something shifted in the air. They weren't laughing anymore. They were watching. In that moment, it became clear humans were no longer the joke. Something had changed. Something deep within the fabric of the universe had shifted. But what would happen next? Would humanity's show of strength be enough to turn the tide? Or had we just made a dangerous enemy? The countdown had begun. The next move was ours. As the Aegis floated silently in the vast expanse of space, its crew could feel the weight of the moment pressing down on them. The ship's sleek, almost translucent design blended perfectly with the backdrop of stars. But inside, every system hummed with the pulse of a mission that was anything but routine. The team had trained for years for this, yet nothing could have truly prepared them for the reality of what was unfolding. They had no idea who the aliens were or what they wanted, but one thing was clear: they were here and they had been watching. The crew, a carefully selected group of humanity's brightest minds and strongest leaders, sat in tense silence. Commander Lee, the ship's leader, was the first to break the quiet. His voice was calm, but his hands were clenched on the armrest of his seat. "Report," he said, his tone demanding an update without sounding panicked. Lieutenant Harris, the ship's communication officer, was the one to speak up. Her eyes flicked over the glowing display screens, her fingers moving across the controls in a practiced blur. "We've made contact, sir. They're not responding to our signals, but their ships are showing up on our radar. They're circling in, but they haven't fired yet. They're waiting. She hesitated. "They're watching us." Commander Lee's eyes narrowed. He had hoped for more than just a staring contest. In all their simulations, they had expected some form of resistance, but the sheer size and quiet confidence of the alien ships unsettled him. These beings were not like anything humanity had encountered before. They didn't seem concerned by the appearance of the Aegis. In fact, it was almost as if they had been expecting it. He stood up and paced toward the center of the control room. "Captain Matthews," he called out, addressing the officer responsible for the ship's weapons systems. "Status on our defense grid." Captain Matthews, a seasoned veteran with more than 2 decades of experience, adjusted his headset and responded with a hint of frustration in his voice. "Everything's operational, Commander. The energy shields are at full power, and the stealth mode is intact. But if these ships are what I think they are, then what?" Lee pressed, stepping closer. Matthews didn't answer right away. He had seen enough in his career to recognize the fear creeping into his voice, but he kept his composure. "If they're what I think they are, sir, then they're not just observers. These ships have weapons, powerful ones. If they engage us, we'll need to be ready." The tension in the room thickened. The Aegis was designed to be a silent, unseen predator. But if they were discovered, they would be in a dangerous position. Their stealth technology had been the crown jewel of human engineering, but no amount of innovation could truly guarantee survival if the aliens had superior firepower. The silence was broken by a soft chime from Harris's console. She looked at the readings and immediately turned to Lee. "Commander, you need to see this." Lee hurried over to her station, his heart racing. The data on the screen was impossible to ignore. The alien ships, at least a dozen of them now, had begun to form a formation, like an intricate web in space. There was no immediate threat, but the precision of their movements was calculated, deliberate. It was as if they were preparing for something. Lee's mind raced, trying to process the patterns. It didn't take long for him to realize what was happening. The aliens were trying to communicate, not with words, but with positioning. They were sending a message through their actions, and it was one of dominance. They had surrounded the Aegis, cutting off every possible escape route, and now they were closing in. It was a form of pressure, a calculated demonstration of their control over the situation. "What's their move?" Lee asked, his voice steady but laced with urgency. Harris's fingers flew across the controls again, trying to get a better scan of their intentions. "No sign of aggression yet, Commander. But they're definitely waiting for us to make a move." Lee nodded slowly. They weren't going to just sit there and wait to be picked apart. This was their moment. Their chance to prove that humanity wasn't going to be pushed around. The Aegis had the element of surprise, and they had to use it before the aliens realized how vulnerable they truly were. "Captain Matthews," Lee said, turning his attention to the weapons officer, "prepare to launch a defensive countermeasure if necessary. But hold off on engaging until I give the word. We don't want to start a war over a misunderstanding." Matthews nodded, his fingers hovering over the ship's weapons panel. He knew the stakes. "Understood, sir. But if they fire first, we'll be ready." As the crew waited, a sense of uneasy calm settled over the control room. No one spoke much. Each of them was lost in their thoughts, wondering what the aliens knew, what they could possibly want from humanity. Lee couldn't shake the nagging thought that something wasn't right. If the aliens had been watching them for so long, why had they waited until now to make their presence known? And why had they laughed at them in the first place? What had they seen in humanity that seemed so ridiculous to them? Was it the fact that we were still a young species, fumbling our way through the cosmos? Or was it something more, something darker? As the Aegis drifted closer to the alien ships, the eerie silence stretched on. Then, out of nowhere, a new signal appeared on the ship's radar. It wasn't a transmission, not like the one they'd received before. This was something entirely different, an energy pulse, a beam of concentrated power that suddenly erupted from one of the alien vessels. The crew gasped, instinctively bracing themselves for impact, but the pulse didn't strike them. Instead, it was aimed at a distant point in space, at something far beyond their current position. "What the hell was that?" Matthews asked, his eyes wide in disbelief. Harris quickly ran diagnostics, but the pulse had been too fast for any clear data to be gathered. "It wasn't a weapon. Not directly. It's like a signal of some kind. But it wasn't directed at us." Lee frowned. "Directed at what, then?" The question hung in the air like a thick fog. They had no answers, no way of understanding what had just happened. All they knew was that the aliens were sending signals that humanity had yet to fully comprehend. And in that moment, the mission's stakes seemed to shift once again. The Aegis wasn't just a ship on a reconnaissance mission anymore. It had become the center of an intergalactic puzzle, a puzzle humanity had no idea how to solve. What did the aliens know that they weren't telling them? And why did they keep looking at humanity like it was some kind of game? There was no going back now. The clock was ticking, and the stakes had just risen to a level no one had predicted. Would humanity emerge as the underdog who turned the tables, or would they be swallowed by the very forces that once laughed at them? The only certainty was that nothing would ever be the same. The silence aboard the Aegis had become almost unbearable. The strange energy pulse the crew had witnessed moments earlier seemed to hang in the air like an omen, casting a shadow over every thought. Every member of the crew knew that they were on the edge of something monumental, yet the more they tried to understand the aliens' intentions, the less clear everything became. The aliens' ships were still circling, their movements deliberate but slow, as if they were toying with the humans aboard the Aegis. It was as if the aliens were testing their every reaction, waiting for a mistake. Commander Lee paced in the control room, his mind racing. They had no idea what the pulse was or what the aliens wanted. Were they preparing for something bigger? Were they just waiting for humanity to make a misstep? His gut told him they were being lured into a trap, but he couldn't afford to make a wrong move. If he acted too hastily, they could find themselves in a battle they couldn't win. If he waited too long, they might never get the chance to strike back. "Commander, we've intercepted another signal," Harris said suddenly, her voice shaky but firm. "This one is different. It's not directed at us, but it's coming from one of their ships. It's a countdown." The room fell into a stunned silence. A countdown. What did that mean? The implications were terrifying. Were the aliens preparing to launch something catastrophic? Or was it a countdown to something more sinister? No one knew. Lee swallowed hard, trying to keep his voice steady. "How much time do we have?" 10 minutes, Harris replied, her eyes locked on the screen. Countdown was now ticking down slowly, and it seemed almost deliberate. Every second that passed felt like an eternity. "Whatever they're planning, we don't have much time to figure it out." Lee's mind raced as he turned toward Matthews. "Captain, is our defensive grid capable of handling something we haven't seen before? We've prepared for engagement, but if they've got something new..." Matthews didn't hesitate. "Sir, our shields are at full capacity, and the weapons systems are ready for any standard attack. But if they're using a weapon we've never seen, it's impossible to know if we can stop it." Lee nodded grimly. The odds were stacked against them, but they couldn't back down now. They had to make a decision. The Aegis could slip back into stealth mode, but would that even help them if the aliens already knew their position? Or should they try to strike before the countdown reached 0, hoping to catch the aliens off guard? "Lieutenant Harris," Lee said, his voice sharp, "can we make any sense of the signals they've been sending? Are they communicating with us, or are they just preparing for an attack?" Harris hesitated, biting her lip as she analyzed the data again. "I don't think they're trying to talk. At least not with words. It's more like they're testing us, poking us, seeing how we react. And the countdown, I think, it's part of their plan. Whatever it is, it's a challenge, a show of power." Lee clenched his jaw. This wasn't just a confrontation anymore. It was a game. The aliens were trying to provoke a reaction, to force humanity to make a mistake. But if they were to fall for it, the consequences would be disastrous. "Everyone, brace yourselves," Lee ordered. "We are not going to wait for them to make the first move. We're going to show them that we're not afraid. Prepare for evasive maneuvers, and be ready to fire if they make an aggressive move." The crew sprang into action, each person moving with precision. The ship was on a razor's edge, ready to react at the first sign of hostility. The tension in the air was palpable, every beep and click of the ship's systems echoing like a countdown of its own. Lee sat in his seat, his hands tight on the controls, his eyes never leaving the screen. The alien ships were still circling. His mind was consumed with the thought of what could happen in just a few moments. What would they do when the clock ran out? Were they going to attack, or would they unleash something even worse? "I don't like this, Commander," Matthews muttered, his eyes scanning the alien ships. "They're too calm. It's like they know something we don't." Harris, still monitoring the alien communication, spoke up with urgency. "I've got something. It's faint, but it's a transmission, not from their ships, but from somewhere else off to the right. It's moving toward us." Lee's heart skipped a beat. "A new player?" "I don't know," Harris answered. "But it's coming fast, and the readings are unlike anything we've seen before. It's not an alien ship, at least not one we've detected." Lee felt the hairs on the back of his neck rise. This was it, the unknown factor, the thing they hadn't prepared for. Just as he opened his mouth to give the order to investigate, the countdown reached 1 minute. "Shields up," Matthews shouted, his hands moving frantically across his console. "Prepare for impact." The room erupted into chaos as the crew scrambled to their stations. But before anyone could take a breath, the alien ships did something unexpected. They stopped moving. Every single one of them froze, hovering in place. The tension in the control room was unbearable as everyone tried to process what was happening. And then, just as suddenly as the countdown had started, the entire fleet released a massive burst of energy, a shockwave of power that rattled the Aegis. It wasn't aimed directly at them, but it was clear that the energy was meant to test their resolve. The ship rocked violently, and the crew struggled to maintain control. "Damage, report," Lee barked, his voice cutting through the chaos. Harris was the first to speak. "We've sustained minor damage to our shields, but we're still intact." Whatever that was, it didn't breach our defenses. Lee exhaled a breath he didn't realize he was holding. But just as they thought they might have a moment of respite, the energy pulse from earlier returned this time, aimed directly at them. The alien ships were preparing for something bigger, something that would make the earlier energy burst seem like a mere warning. The crew braced themselves, but the true danger was still lurking in the unknown. The Aegis was on the verge of being caught in a storm that would push them to their limits. Would humanity be able to face what was coming? Or had they just signed their own death sentence by underestimating the alien threat? The clock was ticking. The tension was unbearable. And the next move was anyone's guess. The shockwave from the alien fleet's energy pulse reverberated through the Aegis, rattling the ship like a toy in the hands of a giant. The crew struggled to maintain their footing as the force rocked them from side to side. Commander Lee's knuckles were white, gripping the armrests with a strength he didn't know he had. The lights flickered once, twice, before stabilizing again, but the room remained thick with tension. For a moment, it seemed like everything was falling apart. The ship was still intact, but for how long? The alien ships didn't move. They simply hovered, watching. It was as if they were waiting for the humans to react, waiting for them to make the first mistake. It was chilling, the calm before the storm, but the countdown had already passed. What was coming next? Were the aliens testing the Aegis, or were they preparing for something far more devastating? Before Lee could give another order, the communication console beeped urgently. Harris, her face pale from the sudden impact, stared at her screen. She looked up, her voice cracking. "Commander, you need to see this." Lee stepped forward quickly. "What is it?" Harris didn't immediately answer. Her hands were shaking as she turned the screen to face him. "It's the signal. The one that was coming from the right side. It's not just one ship. It's a fleet. A whole new fleet." Lee's eyes widened. He had thought they were dealing with the alien fleet, the ones that had mocked humanity, but this new fleet was something entirely different. The readings on the screen didn't match any of the alien signatures they had previously detected. This was something new, something powerful. "What do you mean, new fleet? Are you saying there's another group of aliens out there?" Lee asked, trying to keep his voice steady despite the growing sense of dread. Harris nodded, her brow furrowed in disbelief. "It's not just one fleet, Commander. It's 3. They're coming in fast, and they're armed. The readings are off the charts. This wasn't part of the original threat. It's like they're arriving in response to something." Lee's heart pounded in his chest. 3 fleets? They had been preparing for an encounter with the original alien ships, but now it seemed that everything had changed. He turned to Matthews, his voice tight with urgency. "Captain, what's the status of our shields and weapons? Do we have enough to fight off this new threat?" Matthews didn't answer immediately. He was busy, working furiously, his hands moving over the console with a precision born of years of combat experience. Finally, he looked up, his face grim. "Our shields are still holding up, but we've only got enough power to defend against 1 fleet, maybe 2, if we're lucky. If all 3 show up at once, we're going to need reinforcements." Lee's mind raced. Reinforcements? They were in the middle of uncharted space, with no way to call for help. The entire human race was at the mercy of a war they hadn't even known was coming. But what was worse was that these new fleets didn't just show up uninvited. They had to have been tracking the original alien ships. Had the Aegis's appearance triggered this new threat, or was it something else? Was it something that humanity was still not understanding about the forces at play? Suddenly, the unfamiliar fleets came into full view, their ships larger and more intimidating than anything the crew had seen before. Their sleek, metallic bodies shimmered under the light of distant stars, and the dark shadows they cast seemed to stretch forever. This wasn't just a fight for survival anymore. It was the beginning of a war. "What do we know about them?" Lee demanded, his mind working to keep up with the rapidly changing situation. "Nothing," Harris said, shaking her head in frustration. "They're not responding to any signals. It's like they're not interested in talking. They're just there." The implications of that hit Lee like a punch to the gut. If these new fleets weren't here for communication, and if the original alien fleet wasn't hostile yet, then these newcomers might be. Lee's mind flashed back to the eerie silence that had filled the air before the countdown. It wasn't just a test. The aliens were watching, waiting for something. But what? Were these new fleets their allies, or were they an entirely different faction with their own agenda? "Status on their weapons?" Lee asked, trying to maintain control. "They're powering up," Matthews said, his voice low. "They're preparing for something big. I don't think we can avoid this." Lee's heart pounded. They had no time to think, no time to plan. The game had changed. The stakes had just escalated beyond anything they could have anticipated. They were caught in the middle of a conflict that wasn't just about humanity's survival. It was about something far larger, something beyond their understanding. As the seconds ticked down, Lee glanced back at the screens, and that's when it happened. A new signal flared to life on the radar, cutting through the chaotic comms like a knife. It was a strange frequency, unlike anything they had encountered before. The signal didn't just come from the new fleets, though it was coming from the direction of the original alien ships. And it was. It was a transmission directed at them. A chill ran down Lee's spine. This wasn't a signal of aggression. This was something else. It wasn't a challenge. It was an invitation. An invitation to come closer. The crew watched in stunned silence, waiting for Lee to respond. But how could they respond? What did it mean? Was it a trap, or was it the key to understanding everything that had been happening? Lee's eyes narrowed. He didn't trust any of this. The mocking alien laughter, the mysterious new fleets, the strange signal, they were all part of a puzzle he wasn't sure he was ready to solve. "We're not making any moves until we understand what we're dealing with," Lee said, his voice steely. "Lieutenant Harris, open a direct line to the alien ships. Let's see what they want. But keep our weapons at the ready. If this goes south, we'll be ready to act." The seconds stretched into minutes as the crew awaited the response. And then, just as the tension reached its peak, a new image appeared on the screen, an alien face. Not a face in the traditional sense, but a being of light and energy, incomprehensible in form, yet unmistakable in its purpose. The alien didn't speak, it simply looked at them. Its eyes, if they could be called that, seemed to pierce into the very souls of the crew, as if testing their worth. Lee's heart skipped a beat. Whatever was coming, they were no longer just players in a game. They were participants in something much bigger, something that no human could have anticipated, and they were running out of time. The alien face on the screen pulsed with an eerie glow, its eyes seeming to shimmer with an intelligence far beyond anything the crew of the Aegis had ever encountered. For a moment, the ship was utterly silent, the tension in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. Commander Lee stared at the image, his mind racing. What did it want? Was it an enemy or something else entirely? It had made no threatening move, yet everything about it screamed of power and an understanding of the universe far beyond humanity's grasp. "Lieutenant Harris," Lee said slowly, his voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Can you make any sense of this? Is it communicating, or is this some sort of trap?" Harris's fingers hovered above the console, her eyes scanning the unknown energy signature. "It's Not a normal signal, she said, the confusion in her voice clear. It's like it's listening to us, waiting for a response. I can't tell what it wants, but the signal seems to be interacting with our ship's systems. Lee's mind snapped into focus. The alien wasn't just watching them, it was studying them. Perhaps it was trying to understand them, or perhaps it was simply assessing their worth. He turned to Matthews. What's our status? We're holding steady, sir, Matthews replied, his voice tight. Our shields are still holding up, but we're not in a good position. If that signal disrupts our systems further, we won't be able to defend ourselves. The clock was ticking. Lee knew they couldn't afford to wait much longer, not with the alien fleet looming just outside and the unknown Third Fleet closing in. They had to act. But how? I'm not going to sit here waiting for an attack, Lee said, his decision made. We'll respond to the signal, but we won't let our guard down. Harris, I want you to broadcast a message. Not a threat, not an invitation, just a simple transmission. Let's see if we can make a connection. The crew worked quickly, setting up the transmission. As the signal was sent, Lee's heart raced. What if this wasn't a diplomatic move? What if this was just the beginning of humanity's final battle for survival? Seconds dragged by, then a minute. The tension was unbearable. And then, suddenly, the alien face on the screen shifted. The glowing eyes narrowed as the entity seemed to process their message. Then, without warning, a sound echoed throughout the ship, a low, resonant hum, followed by a voice. Humanity, you are not what we expected. The voice wasn't like anything they'd heard before. It wasn't mechanical, but it wasn't quite organic either. It was a deep, resonating tone, almost hypnotic, as though it was speaking directly into their minds. You are not the species we feared, the alien voice continued. You are something far more dangerous.
Lee felt a chill spread through him.
The words were both a revelation and a warning. The aliens weren't just indifferent to humanity, they were scared. But scared of what? What had they discovered about the humans that made them a threat? We did not expect your kind to evolve so quickly, the voice went on, its tone changing as if in recognition of something. You have adapted to the stars, to the unknown, and now you have awakened us. Lee's breath caught in his throat. This was it, the confirmation that humanity wasn't just a passive participant in the universe's grand scheme. They were more than capable of influencing the balance of power among the stars. But who or what had they awakened? Before he could respond, the ship's sensors began to go haywire. The mysterious Third Fleet, the one that had been tracking them, was now within firing range. The Aegis's shields flared under the sudden barrage of energy pulses. Lee cursed under his breath. Damage report, he shouted. We're holding, but barely, Matthews replied. We're taking hits to the outer hull, but our internal systems are intact. The alien face on the screen shifted again, its gaze more intense now. You have brought this upon yourselves, it said, almost as if it were pitying them. Your species was not meant to wield the power you have found. Lee's mind raced. What was it talking about? Had humanity unknowingly uncovered something they weren't prepared for? Just then, the ship lurched violently. The countdown from the original alien fleet still hanging over them reached its final seconds, and everything seemed to implode at once. The entire fleet of aliens, both the original and the new arrivals, suddenly shifted. They stopped firing, their energy weapons powered down, their ships seemingly frozen in place. And then the screen flickered once more, and another message appeared. Humanity, You have been given a choice. Lee's breath caught in his chest. This was the moment. The aliens were offering them something. What, though? A chance to survive, or a chance to become part of something far greater or far worse. The test has ended, the alien voice intoned. You will either embrace your potential or fall. Lee didn't have time to process what it meant. The alien ships had once again powered up, their weapons locked and ready. But before they could strike, the Aegis's sensors detected something truly astonishing. A fourth fleet, a fleet of human ships, had appeared on the horizon. The fleet wasn't a rescue force. It wasn't a military backup. It was the result of a new era, a secret project humanity had been working on for years, hidden away from the public eye. It was a fleet of stealth ships, enhanced with technology gleaned from alien interactions, ready to join the fight. Lee's mind reeled as the new fleet, his own people, arrived in full force. The Aegis wasn't alone anymore. They were part of something bigger than themselves, and they had just unlocked a door to a future that had been waiting for them all along. And then, as the tension reached its peak, the final twist came. The mysterious alien fleet that had once mocked humanity, the one that had laughed at their efforts, suddenly retreated. The transmission blinked out, the face disappeared, and the countdown was silenced. The threat was gone. Or was it? Lee stared at the now empty space where the alien ships had been, a strange unease filling his chest. The aliens had given humanity a choice, but the question lingered. Was this just the beginning? Had they truly won? Or had they just stepped into a larger, more dangerous game? The real conflict, it seemed, was only just beginning. The Aegis drifted in space, the hum of its engines, the only sound in the cockpit, as Lee stared at the now empty space where the alien fleets had once been. For a moment, it felt as though the entire universe had held its breath. The sudden silence was almost deafening. The alien face had vanished. The countdown had stopped, and the mysterious new fleets were no longer a threat. The immediate danger had passed, but something didn't sit right with Lee. He had no idea what had just happened, or why the aliens had retreated, but he had the unsettling feeling that this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. "Commander," Harris spoke, her voice shaky but steady. "The new fleet. It's ours." She paused, as if unsure how to finish the sentence. "They're humans, sir. The ships are human-made, and they're not just armed with conventional weaponry. They've got tech we've never seen before." Lee didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. Their own people had shown up at the exact right moment, but how had they known to come? And what was this new technology? It wasn't just about surviving now. It was about understanding what humanity had become in the face of alien contact. Before he could respond, Matthews's voice crackled over the intercom. "Commander, you need to see this." Lee made his way to the operations station. The crew watched as the new fleet of stealth ships slowly approached, their sleek forms cutting through the black void like shadows. The ships were different, far more advanced than anything humanity had ever conceived. They were smaller, faster, and their hulls glowed faintly, pulsing with energy. Lee had to admit, they were beautiful in a way, but the technology was foreign, and that made him nervous. "Are they going to attack?" Lee asked, his eyes narrowing as he scanned the ship's readouts. The third fleet, the one that had just arrived, was an enigma, and the last thing they needed was another fight on their hands. "No," Harris answered after a brief scan. "They're hailing us." Lee's mind raced. They weren't just getting reinforcements, they were being contacted. His thoughts swirled with possibilities. Were these ships sent by some shadow government? A secret project? Or had humanity unknowingly unlocked technology that was far more advanced than they'd ever realized? The communications screen flickered, and a figure appeared. It wasn't an alien, but a human, a woman with short, dark hair wearing a black uniform with a patch that Lee didn't recognize. She stood tall, her expression unreadable. "This is Captain Veronica of the Vanguard Fleet," she said, her voice calm but resolute. "We've come to assist and to explain." Lee's breath caught in his throat. The Vanguard Fleet. The name was unfamiliar, and yet there was something about it that felt important, like it had been a secret they'd never been meant to know. He was about to ask her how they had known to find them, but she spoke first. "You've been part of something much larger than you realize," Captain Veronica continued. Her eyes locked on the camera. "We've been monitoring your progress for years, watching as your species grew, your interactions with the alien factions, your discovery of alien technology. It's all led to this moment. And it's no accident." Lee felt a surge of confusion and anger. So, this was all planned? The aliens, the fleets, everything? Veronica nodded slowly. "Yes, Commander, but it's not as simple as you think. You've been part of a test, a trial, to see how humanity would handle itself when faced with the unknown. It's a trial that spans generations, not just years. We've been preparing you, guiding you in the shadows. Your species had to be ready for what was coming." "Ready for what?" Lee pressed, his voice tinged with disbelief. "What could possibly be so important that you've been watching us, manipulating us like this?" She exhaled slowly, as if weighing her words carefully. "You were never meant to be alone in the universe, Commander. Your race is on the brink of something far bigger than you could ever understand. The alien species you've encountered, those who mocked you, the ones who laughed at you, they were never your real enemy. They were the first obstacle. The real test begins now. The forces at play, the ones you've yet to meet, they will either see humanity as a powerful ally or an unpredictable threat." Lee's mind reeled. He had always known there was more to this universe than what was visible to the eye. But this was beyond comprehension. Aliens watching them, a secret fleet, and now a new revelation. Humanity wasn't just a bystander in some cosmic game, they were players. "Who are these other factions?" Lee asked, struggling to keep his voice steady. "What do they want with us?" Captain Veronica's expression hardened. "The factions that you've encountered, the ones that tried to destroy you, have a long history. Some are ancient, others are newer, but all of them are connected by one goal: control. Control of power, resources, and knowledge. And they'll do anything to prevent humanity from becoming a force that could rival them." Lee's stomach churned. He had thought the original alien fleet was the worst humanity would face, but now he realized they were only the beginning. The universe was far more dangerous than they had ever realized. "We've been studying you," Captain Veronica continued. "Humanity has potential, more than any of the others. You've evolved in a way that no one expected. You adapt, you learn, and you survive against all odds. That's why we've been preparing you for this moment. But there's more. The technology you've discovered, the ships, the weapons, it was all planted in your path. You were never meant to stumble upon it. You were meant to find it." Lee's thoughts were spinning. Why didn't you just tell us all of this? Because you needed to be ready, Veronica replied. If we had come to you earlier, if we had revealed ourselves before you were ready, you wouldn't have been able to grasp the full weight of what's coming. But now you are. Lee took a deep breath, trying to digest everything that had just been thrown at him. So, what now? Are you here to help us fight these alien factions? Veronica's eyes softened slightly. Yes, but it won't be easy. The next few years will be critical. We're at a crossroads. The alien factions that you've encountered, and the others you haven't yet met, they will test humanity's resolve. They will try to break you. And there's only one way for humanity to survive. You need to unify. You need to show them that you are more than just a collection of nations. You need to show them that humanity can be a force for good in the galaxy. Lee nodded, his mind still racing. He felt the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. They weren't just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for humanity's place in the cosmos. But what if they weren't ready? What if humanity wasn't as united as they needed to be? You're not alone in this, Veronica said, sensing his doubts. You'll have our help. But ultimately, it's up to you, to your people, to decide what kind of future you want to build. Lee looked out the window of the Aegis, his gaze fixed on the stars. The galaxy had just opened up before them, and with it, endless possibilities. But also endless dangers. All right, Lee said, his voice firm. Let's get to work. As the Vanguard fleet moved into position alongside the Aegis, Lee realized that this was just the beginning. The aliens had tested them. They had laughed at humanity's early attempts, but they were no longer laughing. Now, humanity had a chance to prove itself. The galaxy was vast and full of secrets, but humanity had something none of the alien factions had, the will to fight for its future. And with that, humanity would rise. The story wasn't over. It was only just beginning. And Lee was ready to lead them into whatever came next.